Good evening and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight for our bonus class this year. Tonight we've got Tim Badger finishing his talk on Zechariah, and so we're looking forward to that. But to open, we'll open with hymn and prayer, hymn being 280. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. We come before you now, grateful for this opportunity we have to gather together and study the words you have written down for us to learn from. Please be with Tim tonight as he explains your words to us, so that we might grow in knowledge and understanding of Zechariah and his life of service with you. And we approach you now through your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, who we pray will return soon and set up your kingdom. Amen. Tim Badger will be speaking to us on a return to Babylon, and he's asked that we read Zechariah 5 to 6 verse 8, and Sam Mansfield will do that reading for us, after which if you come straight up, Tim. Awesome, thank you.
Good evening. Reading with you all Zechariah chapter 5 through to 6 verse 8, which is the last three night visions. Again I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, a flying scroll. And he said to me, "What do you see?" I answered, "I see a flying scroll. Its length is 20 cubits, and its width 10 cubits. Then he said to me, "This is the curse that goes out over the face of the whole land. For everyone who steals shall be cleaned out according to what is on one side, and everyone who swears falsely shall be cleaned out according to what is on the other side. I will send it out, declares Yahweh Sabaoth, and it shall enter the house of the thief and the house of him who swears falsely by my name, and it shall remain in his house and consume it, both timber and stones. Then the angel who talked with me came forward and said to me, Lift your eyes and see what this is that is going out. And I said, What is it? He said, This is the basket that is going out. And he said, This is their iniquity in all the land. And behold, the leaden cover was lifted, and there was a woman sitting in the basket. And he said, This is wickedness. And he thrust her back into the basket and thrust down the leaden weight on its opening. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, 2 women coming forward. The wind was in their wings. They had wings in their wings of a stork. And they lifted up the basket between earth and heaven. Then I said to the angel who talked with me, Where are they taking the basket? He said to me, To the land of Shinar, to build a house for it. And when this is prepared, they will set the basket down there on its base. Again I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, 4 chariots came out from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were mountains of bronze. The first chariot had red horses, the second black horses, the third white horses, and the 4th chariot dappled horses, all of them strong. Then I answered and said to the angel who talked with me, What are these, my Lord? And the angel answered and said to me, These are going out to the 4 winds of heaven, after presenting themselves before the Lord of all the earth. The chariot with the black horses goes toward the north country. The white ones go after them, and the dapple ones go toward the south country. When the strong horses came out, they were impatient to go and patrol the earth. And he said, Go, patrol the earth. So they patrolled the earth. Then he cried to me, Behold, those who go toward the north country have set my spirit at rest in the north country.
Thanks, Sam. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be together again. A little bit of extracurricular, so to speak. Does everyone have one of the little handouts? There's a new one this week that I just put a couple things so you don't have to scratch down on a piece of paper when we get there. Hopefully everyone's got one. There's more up here if you don't. I think maybe someone up the back has some spares as well. Well, this is nice to be together and exciting. I'm really excited because we get an opportunity to get to what we might call the end of Zechariah's night visions. So we've been taking some time going through them and trying to collect the message of the night visions for the people in Zechariah's time, but also how those night visions project long-term plan that God has for the nations and for Israel and also the saints. So Zechariah is super encouraging, and I think hopefully we've been able to see that as we go through, especially with understanding the context of the times. So tonight we're going to look at the visions in chapter 5, which are extraordinary because they're so different than the visions that we've looked at so far. So let's just, before we start, do a little recap, and maybe those who are here for the first time, this might help. First vision, man among the myrtle trees. What's the main message? Just give me a one-liner. I love saying things in one sentence, so... Rest. All the earth is at rest. So that's the end that we see in the first vision of the man among the myrtle trees. Everything's quiet at rest. Good? 4 carpenters. Give me a little, what's one of the messages of the vision of the 4 horns and 4 carpenters? Get working? Yes. Because God's going to do the tossing out, right, of the nations, the big pictures. Yep. Get working and build for God. Good. Men with the measuring line. What's the little message? God is the wall of fire around us. Yeah, we don't need normal walls. Jerusalem's going to be protected with a wall of fire. So God's going to do that protecting. That's what the man with the measuring line learned. Joshua the high priest, a bit more of a complicated vision. Restoration of the priesthood and dealing with sin, the real problem, right? And that was something that they were trying to do in Zechariah's time, but obviously much more importantly in the full view with Christ coming as the high priest. And then it switches to Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel's mentioned in the next vision of the 2 olive trees and the lampstand. And that vision of the olive trees and lampstand was an encouragement to Zerubbabel in particular in the rebuilding of the temple, not just the priesthood. And that one was portraying a community of kings and priests that were, through God's Spirit, fueling the lampstand of the age to come, right? And that's encouraging for Zechariah in his time too, as God resurrects and brings back those 2 offices, the line of Aaron and the line of David. Well, this brings us to a curious vision of a flying scroll and something else that's flying, a woman that's carrying an ephah, or the New King James and some other versions call it a basket. Up until this point, I think you'll agree, we've been hearing a lot of positive things about the temple and rebuilding, right? Lampstand, priesthood, the foundation stone, the wall around Jerusalem, all of those things related to the city and the temple are positive. But I want you to listen carefully as we go into these 2 visions in Zechariah 5, because there is also imagery here of temple and tabernacle, but it's cast in a very negative light. So this is a change of tone in the night visions for Zechariah, and this really forms a warning. These things are going to take place. These kind of unhappy events are going to be taking place before the earth can be quiet and rest. So this is yet to take place for Zechariah, and God needs to show him not just the good news, but the bad news as well. And that's what the prophets frequently do. It's reality of what's coming. So when we look at these visions, let's jump right in. There's 2 in chapter 5. A lot of people squish these together into one vision. So you'll hear a lot of people refer to the 7 visions or night visions of Zechariah. However, it is possible to see these as 2. They are actually 2 distinct visions, but they are completely connected. He does see different things, so I would sort of go along the lines that there's 8 night visions, but these are very, very connected. That's why some people put them as 7. Right, let's look at this one, right? Let's jump in. It's a little short one, but it's packed with really interesting things. Here is a double-sided scroll. So verse 1, he raises his eyes, and there's a flying scroll. I'm not sure if it had wings, but I'm just put it in there to show you the effect that it's flying. He may not have seen wings attached to it. But otherwise it looks like the magic carpet from Aladdin. So I thought, well, I'll just put it. Anyway, we had fun trying to draw that. I didn't draw it, as you know. Anyway, so there's a flying scroll, and it is going through the air. And the first thing we learn about it is really interesting. We don't even know what's on the scroll, right? In verse 2, look what it says. What do you see? So I answered, Zechariah says, I see a flying scroll. Its length is 20 cubits, and its width 10 cubits. So that's the first thing we learn. It would have been sizable. 20 cubits, I did write this down somewhere. 20 cubits is quite big, and 10 cubits, so it's huge. Like, it's this big thing, and everyone could read it, I presume. And we also find out that it is double-sided. So if you notice in verse 3, then he said to me, this is the curse, so this scroll is negative, that goes out of the face of the whole earth. And this is what it says. This is the message. Every thief shall be expelled according to this side of the scroll. So that's on one side. And every perjurer shall be expelled according to that side of it. So this is a double-sided scroll. And this has to do with two groups of people. It has to do with thieves and perjurers. So I'm going to use the word liar for now, because that's the idea of it. So this has to do with thieves and liars. And when we read, this scroll actually enters into, in verse 4, right? It enters into the house of the thief and the house of the liar, and it consumes the stonework and the timberwork of that house. So imagine like a 20 by 10 cubit scroll that's flying through the air. You open your door to go out in the morning, and the scroll just woof into your house, and it obliterates your house. That's the idea. And if you got a glimpse of it as it was coming in your house, you'd read it in big letters, curse on thieves and curse on liars. And it's coming into your house, so you might realize something's wrong with you and your house, right? This is a really dramatic picture of a scroll that enters the house. Now, let's just unpack a few things about the scroll. First of all, this idea that it's double-sided is really interesting. You don't kind of really hear of double-sided things in the Bible, right? We do, like double-sided printers are pretty common, but double-sided scrolls are rare, and it's rare in ancient times. They definitely did do it, but it wasn't that common. Anything else double-sided in the Bible that you can think of, just to kind of... Oh, the scroll of Revelation. Is that double-sided too? Nice, Dan. It's good to have Dan here. What else is double-sided? There was a double-sided scroll in Ezekiel, I think, as well, or Jeremiah. Not common. They do exist. This isn't a scroll. This is something else that's double-sided that God wrote. Just 10 Commandments. Yeah, we're told that. We'll come back to that in a minute. But the 10 Commandments in Exodus are definitely double-sided. They're written on this side and on that side. I just want you to keep that in mind. Well, let's have a look at this idea of thieves and liars, because obviously this is a curse that's going forward, and God is saying there's a problem, Zechariah, with thieves and liars. Now, up until now, we've already seen that the people have come back, and this is really good. The people have come back to the land, but we know, and we've already seen so far, that there's not everything perfect amongst the people, and especially amongst the priesthood, if you remember that. Haggai, who's writing only a couple months before this, deliberately calls out the priesthood and the offerings of the people and says they're unclean, if you remember that. So there's real problems with corruption, even at this time in coming back. And the people possibly have fallen into that over the last 15 years of non-building. So when you come to this, we realize that there's a problem that goes from the exiles that have returned all the way through to the time of Nehemiah. I just want to think about the current application of this scroll that's cursing, as God says, the thieves and the liars. I think there's an application to Zechariah's time, right? The exiles have come back and they believe in God, but problems have crept in. I want you to come to Malachi chapter 2. So going 80 years down the track from here, you can see these problems have never really gone away, and they're festering. And Malachi, who writes at the time of Nehemiah, is calling these out. Right? Come to Malachi chapter 2, verse 17. Here's some of the corruption that's going on, especially in the priesthood, Malachi calls out. And this is what Zechariah, Zerubbabel, and Joshua had to deal with. Also Ezra and Nehemiah down the track. Look at verse 17. You've wearied Yahweh with your words, yet you say, in what have we wearied him? We know these series of questions in Malachi. In that you say, everyone who does evil is good in the sight of Yahweh, and he delights in them. Or, where is the God of justice? So you can see there's moral issues going on amongst the people even 80 years later in Malachi's time. And look what happens to the people. Come to chapter 3, verse 8. The people are described as thieves, right? Chapter 3, verse 8, will a man rob God? Yet you've robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? And God says, well, you've done it in tithes and offerings. You've thieved me. You've robbed me. Because the people aren't giving to God what is rightfully his. So they've been stealing, right? Come down to have a look at, or above, at verse 5. Lying is an issue in Malachi's time too. This is 80 years on from Zechariah. Verse 5, I will come near you for judgment. I will be a swift witness against sorcerers, adulterers, perjurers, and those who exploit wage earners and widows and orphans, against those who turn away an alien because they do not fear me, says Yahweh of hosts. Now this has a greater application to another time, but this is clearly what Malachi is picking out in his day. Now what happens because of this corruption in the people? What does Nehemiah do in chapter 13? Yeah? He comes back, and he cleanses the temple, as it were, right? And he grabs people, like it's really strong actions by Nehemiah. We know that story. He grabs people by the hair, he condemns them, and he's really upset. And this is almost like a little application of this scroll, right? That the thieves and liars just persisted, and finally Malachi the prophet and Nehemiah himself comes back in person and does a sort of a clean out. But even in Nehemiah's time, the temple's not decimated, is it? The stones and timbers, like Zechariah 5 says, have not actually been pulled apart. In fact, that temple stands and it continues to go through corruption. Well, I think there's more to these thieves and liars than on the surface of what Malachi says. I want to show you probably what Zechariah is really getting at that has a wider application. Come back to the problem in Jeremiah's day. One of the reasons why they went into captivity. Jeremiah 23. I think this is a useful cross-reference to help explain the language of the prophets.